Welcome everybody to our Shine Campus Coffee Hangout. I hope everybody's having a good morning. So today I wanted to talk about a topic that you might not even realize because not everybody has the buzzwords. But what is unconditional love, and how do we get to that space? And so, in order for us to talk about unconditional love, we have to start with where you're at, right? And so, a lot of times in our relationships, where we are is we have this saying that says, I need my partner to do something different for me to be okay. And that happens in all kinds of forms. I know you won't use that sentence, but that's the situation. So my partner needs to talk to me a certain way. They need to be available a certain amount of time. They need to say things that make me feel better, right? Um, there's there's tons. There's a list, and you can maybe put yours down in the chat. What are your things that, or in the comments, like what are your things that you have that match the idea that says I need my partner to do something different for me to be okay? There's tons, and so that creates an issue in our relationship a lot of times, and the issue that it creates looks a lot of times what we might call conditional love, right? Instead of unconditional love, we call it conditional love. So if you do these things, then we're going to be all right. I'll love you, right? But the challenge is we make that into a codependent interaction. What is codependency? So the best way that I know to describe codependency is something that I heard from my mentor, which is he calls it three bases. And so in codependency has three bases where there's victim, perpetrator, then rescuer. And if there's two of us playing it in the relationship, that's how it works. Two of us will be playing it. Um, then if one person goes to a base, the other person goes to another base, but each one stars in the role of the base. So again, we have victim, perpetrator, rescuer. And if I go to the victim base, then my wife would go to the perpetrator rescuer base. If she goes to the rescuer base, I would go to the perpetrator or victim base, right? And so we just go to that base and star in the role. And there's only two people, so you can't say, well, there's three of us playing. There's only two people, right, at a time. But you can switch over quickly. The same thing with standing on the bases. If my wife's standing on the victim base and I want to go to victim base, I go there and she automatically goes to the other bases. And so we play this game between each other of codependency, and it requires the other person to roll or star in the role that matches that game. And what is the problem with that? Well, we would call that conditional love. Like, I'll give you what you want if you're willing to star in that role. And the truth is, if it's conditional love, there really isn't a love. That's not, it's not what love is. And so we need to be able to look at our relationships and see what's there, and then figure out how do we get to a place of unconditional love. What is the path to that? So here we are, we're in this space of constantly interacting in a way that's codependent, where we're giving conditional love, which says, hey, I need my partner to do something different, then I'm going to be okay. We're in that space constantly. How do we move from that space to a space of feeling like whether my partner does or does not, I know that they have the interests of our relationship, the interests of me, the interests of themselves on their mind, and they're working towards that. And I don't need, even if they're not in a moment, I don't need to get involved with that. I get to just be in a place of working on myself and being a support to that person. How do I get to that spot? And for some of us, that might not even feel comfortable to want to get to that spot, but that's the ideal spot. I'll tell you why it's purposeful. So, the reason it's purposeful, before I tell you how to get there, the reason it's purposeful is because your relationship and you actually deserve to be in a scenario where you don't have to worry about somebody else pulling on different behaviors for you to get to a new happy emotional space. Can you imagine what Pinocchio went through? Right? Pinocchio had to go through a scenario where he needed something different. He needed somebody to pull his strings in order for him to move and go about his life. And you might accidentally be Pinocchio in your own life. just because you are being puppeted by the interactions and emotions of another person. And in order to be free, and again, being free might be a scary thing because it's possible that you've been living your whole life like this. It's possible that you've been living your whole life in a way that says, um, their emotions will determine how I feel. Their behaviors will determine how I feel. Right. And so me telling you, like, hey, we're gonna unlink those two, that might be scary for you. But I'm telling you, there's a better way of living, a higher way of living, if you're willing to become a real boy, so to speak, right? Because in the idea of Pinocchio, that was his search. He wanted to become a real boy. All right, so unstrap yourself and you get freedom. And what happens whenever you're free? Well, whenever you're free, you give your relationship a chance to be so much more than a codependent scenario. So it's not like you're leaning on it like a drug anymore, right? Instead, you're allowing it to enhance your life, but you're also giving to it. And then you're growing something together that can't really be um, it can't be matched in life. There's nothing like it in life to be able to experience whenever you're able to create a relationship that you give to and that gives back to you just because of what you've been able to create. All right. So that's the why we want to change it. I mean, it might seem obvious, but for a lot of us, I think that our past and our experiences would much rather us be puppeted than to just be free. All right, so how do you get to the freedom part? Well, the freedom part is you getting obsessed with working on yourself. And part of working on ourselves says that we figure out, like, where are all my hooks coming from? What makes me get hooked whenever my partner um, does a certain thing or says a certain thing or has certain emotions? What makes me get hooked? And us figuring that out and then being able to do the work for that is a huge deal to just releasing and being able to be free. And the relationship doesn't start it. It usually starts way back um, in our life, that this pattern of us needing somebody to fix us um, creates this kind of situation for us. Okay, so that's the first thing, is you being able to work on that. But then the other thing is your contribution or what you're giving in your relationship starts to change. So you have to start changing from demanding that there is a certain behavior in your relationship to being the behaviors that you want. So one of the things that's common is, I say to, like, as I teach people to start separating from this codependency, is like, I'm lost. I don't even know what to do now. If I'm not being codependent, I don't even know how to interact. Well, now you start, instead of you being codependent and dependent, letting your behaviors depend on what somebody else is doing, you start injecting the things that you want in your relationship. If we want communication that's open, we start communicating openly, right? If we want to have more of a connected relationship where we're hugging and kissing more and being able to talk about more vulnerable subjects, you start initiating those things. And when you initiate those things, this is the hard work, and this is the reason that people won't continue to do those things. You're going to ruffle some feathers because you're not going to be good at it. Your partner's not going to be good at it. You guys are used to doing codependency, and you're thinking that's what we're going to go back to just because I'm creating something new. There's not a creation thing that doesn't go through some kind of trial or challenge. So we accept that as the growth part. But in our minds and in our hearts, we know, like, it's not about me needing them to do something. It's about me creating the thing that I want in my relationship and not forcing anybody else to be in the same spot necessarily. Right. So as that's happening, you'll notice that if you start getting better at this thing yourself, the contribution that you're making to your relationship is you give your partner a culture of getting better. And as you get that culture starts happening in your relationship, it's actually cultivating something, right? And so everything starts changing your relationship. This is the place, to me, where you have to really work on your unconditional love. And unconditional love says that I'm really separating from outcomes and interactions to determine whether I care and love my partner. Things that will help you to do the unconditional love is admiration. And sometimes it's admiration before you see what you admire. And I know that's a hard one because again, we're not used to interacting this way, but before you see what you admire means like if it was for my wife or yeah, we'll use for my wife. If there's something that she isn't necessarily doing, um, and I want to get in a place of compassion, I have to be able to see that she is that before she maybe is enacting that scenario. Because remember this, when we are afraid or whenever we're going through a hardship, the hypervigilance is the thing that is the loudest. So hypervigilance looks like what? Depression, anxiety, um, fear. Like it's all of those kinds of things. And so what our partners are is not always showing up whenever they are in a state of disconnect or a state of lack of security. But what they are whenever we start creating admiration and respect for them is something totally different. When we start supporting them, it's something totally different. So sometimes we have to see what they are before they are showing that. And that helps us to develop a sense of unconditional love and interaction with them, as much as much as needed, right? And so what's the stopping point for this? There is no stopping point. This will keep growing because what happens in life is as we grow, it's going to create a different kind of era in our life, a different kind of season for us in our life. And the requirement is to constantly strengthen this and partnership up as much as possible. So we need to unify to move together as much as possible around the ideas of building each other up, around the ideas of building our relationship and building our families up. And if we're able to do that, we're going to end up in a place where you'll see there's going to be a lot of peace in the tribulations that you have to go through to get to that point. Will be a huge deal. So in order to do this, the biggest thing is you're going to have to drop your sense that your partner needs to do something different for you to be okay. And you'll have to raise the sense that says, actually, my partner doesn't need to do anything. I'm going to go to work to make sure that I do all the things for me to be okay. And this is not a game. It's a matter of me strengthening myself to be a person that could do security in my relationship, strengthen myself to do love in the relationship, and then also strengthen myself to be able to be supportive and interact in a way that helps to build the both of us up as much as possible. You guys, if you're willing to unmask the unconditional love in your relationship, you're gonna have a big deal. Comment below if you have any kind of questions about what that looks like. And then our marriage communication masterclass helps to unpack a lot of these concepts and talks about the science behind what's going on. If you guys are interested in that, go ahead and click in the link in my bio. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your week.